Yeah, like we wanted to start this off and talk about intranet trends for this year. And we know like intranets are there for, I think, over 20 years. So you could also say like what's actually going on in the space. And I think there's a lot of things going on. And what we did, like we brought 3 trends with us. And if I would have to summarize them, I would say one trend is sort of kind of thinking back of the original strengths of intranet, and we think they reappear now. The second one is a trend around intranets doing actually more than they used to do in a certain area. And the third trend is another trend. It's like intranets are actually doing less in a certain area. Hope that's good as a teaser.
I feel like,
Anything
Frank,
else
though,
to
I
say?
feel like you can't even start this conversation, though, without telling people that before your previous life attending body pump classes, you were actually an intranet consultant that built some of those older intranets. So I think you have a really interesting perspective to bring to the table here.
Yeah, I mean, the point about intranets, I've been building intranets for 20 years, that there are a lot of paradigm shifts over time. What is a good intranet? And usually it's a good idea whenever you think about an intranet and relaunch, is to say, not just is what are the features there and so on. It's more around like, if you think about an intranet, what's actually a good intranet? And it's not about more is more all the time. It's also not about looking at a very large intranet or very small intranets or what the analysts say. Sometimes analysts are also a bit behind in the market. Lara, you notice you talk a lot to analysts in the space, to Gartner, to Forrester, and others, and we will share a bit of that. So it's really good to understand what's going on and what's a good intranet. And that's what we want to share. So the first topic.
Okay.
The first topic that I wanted.
I think I have a lag.
Oh, you have a
Go
lag.
ahead.
Okay.
Take it away. Take it away.
The first topic that I want to share is about branding, and I would say back for good. Here's why. I want to tell a little story about it. Martin Boehringer, which is one of my co-founders at Staffbase, he was invited to the World Economic Forum in Switzerland in Davos, and he was very excited to go. And he was there like very busy in the days and had a lot of sessions that he was attending. One session he was especially excited about was the release and the launch of the 2023 Edelman Trust Barometer. By the way, I think it's a session 7 a.m. in the morning, so they really start early there because it's so packed. And the person you're seeing there talking is Richard Edelman, like it's the CEO. And for over 20 years, they are doing this very important report about the state of trust in society, the state of trust in businesses and media, and what lessons they can teach to business leaders about that. And the major thing is going on around trusted organizations is that businesses are now the most trusted organizations by far, even ahead of NGOs, ahead of governments or the media. And Martin said, Richard Edelman, like 2 times in his presentation, was like pretty much saying, you know what? The employee newsletter is now the most trusted thing in the whole entire world, the most trusted communication channel that we have out there. That's incredible. That's an incredible development in the past, right? And you could say, like, why is this significant? Of course, it's significant because we have a lot of discussions about fact versus fiction and what's going on. And if we thought until a couple of months ago, we have a lot of discussions there, I think we now know it's just the beginning of what's going to happen, right? And what's not sure if everyone has seen this, that's a picture of the Pope. It's AI generated, and it got famous in the last 2 weeks.
Frank, what search query did you use to find this?
That picture got famous because it was shared first on Twitter, and it was shared by a lot of celebrities everywhere. And so like saying, oh my God, like look at the Pope and the jacket and so on. And it turned out it's a fake, right? It was created with the software Midjourney, and it just shows that's the level of sophistication that AI now has for picture generation. And it pretty much means you cannot say anymore if a picture is fact or fiction, if it's real or not. And this means a lot of the things we see is really hard to say, is it true or not? And I know one shouldn't quote yourself, but I've seen this picture, and I did write at LinkedIn after this, is like, the role of branded and trusted channels will be so important moving forward, because on an individual content level, you cannot say if something is fact or fiction anymore, right? Your channels will be so important to say, I've seen the picture on this channel and I trust this channel, so I know it's true, right? That's pretty much the major thing. And for intranets, this means intranet naming and branding is something that's been there for many years. And the intranet was one of the very few tech systems and tools in the company environment who had his own name. Everything else, you would give it the name, like you would say Confluence and SharePoint and Outlook and whatever, but the intranet would have a distinct name, a distinct branding, and that really has helped to build trust in the past. And what we are saying, that's something that's going to be really be important in the future. And it's not just the desktop. It can be that's an example from one of our customers from DHL. Branding is a huge part of the intranet, and it goes on for the desktop side, it goes on for mobile, it goes on even on the mobile app. Like, how is this thing branded on my mobile screen? And we think this branding of the intranet, don't underestimate it. Don't underestimate it to give it a name, because this builds trust, and you will need that trust moving forward, especially with a lot of the content that we see out there.
Yeah, I think that's so true. With all of the customers that we see, I think it's fascinating again and again to see what kind of creative concepts come up with that and what sort of launch activities they do and how much of a name and a brand that becomes for the employees at their company. Like, if you ask somebody at DHL, do you have Smart Connect? Like, they don't have, if you ask them, do you have an employee app or your employee app or something, it's different than if you ask them about Smart Connect. Actually, fun fact, have a friend that works at DHL, and when I asked the question about Smart Connect, she knew what I was talking about. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, cool. And I would say, as a communicator, that's a big investment you should try to make, is like build an internal brand. And it should not be a tool, like say it's not whatever, like I don't want to bash any tools here, but like it's the brand is yours. It stays yours for years to come. And that's something that builds a lot of capital and credibility for everything you do, right? There's a question. It's a great question. Do you want to create a different branding look for your employee intranet versus the corporate look? That's totally possible. We actually see both things. You can do both things. One very practical consideration, for instance, if you have an app, and ideally this app is distributed on the public app store, if you have a very well-known consumer brand, it makes a ton of sense to kind of have a different internal branding and not have run into the risk that like your consumers are seeing the employee app and think it's an app for them and so on. So to make that better is to say have a name and a branding that is distinguishable, right? For instance, one example, Adidas is one of our customers, and like big consumer brand, and their employee app is not Adidas. It's called Stadium, right? And it's so from the outside you wouldn't know that. That's definitely something you should and could keep in mind. Great point, Trisha. Great. So that was the first trend. So rediscover branding. Don't think branding is not important. I think it's going to be more important in the future. The second trend is I would call this more comms and channels. Well, what do we mean with that? What we mean with that is that we see the more we talk about employee experience, the more we think like, what is the best channel to reach employees, right? Maybe for leaders, it might be email. For knowledge workers, it might be Microsoft Teams. For people out in the field on the front line, it might be a mobile app or intranet. It's the omni-channel intranet. However you want to call it, it just means to say the intranet should be wherever employees are, and it should fit into the employee experience, right? If I'm a lot on the go, I should have the ability to put my intranet in the pocket, right? If I'm on the desktop, I have it on the desktop or inside of Microsoft Teams, wherever I am. And that's a big trend that we are seeing. And Lara, I guess it's also something that analysts talk a lot about, right?
Yes. So actually there's a stat or a prediction from Gartner about this. One of the things I do in my work is I talk a lot to analysts at Gartner and Forrester about the space and what's happening and stuff. And they actually say by 2025, a majority of organizations, employees won't be able to recognize one single homepage or something as their intranet, but they'll see it as a really kind of multi-channel experience. And that I think is in line with other research on different categories that we see from analysts. So if you skip forward one more, I brought a slide too. And it's about, analyst research. There's two categories that analysts talk about right now when it comes to kind of employee communications technology. One is employee comms platforms. Those are vendors that come from the app space and have moved into doing these multi-channel experiences, sometimes intranet too. And then they'll talk about intranet vendors as well. And what they say is that the trajectories of those two technology categories are really merging also on the basis of the fact that intranets are being demanded to have more employee communications functionality because of what the innovation that's been brought from employee comms platforms. Interesting thing is that for both of those categories right now, modern intranets and employee comms platforms, both Gartner and Forrester say, okay, super transformational technology for companies, definitely should be really high on companies' investment lists when it comes to tech because of that transformational benefit value. So I could go on about that for a while, but I think, Frank, you actually have one more trend that we wanted to share. So let's talk about that.
Last trend, and this is now more. The second trend was about more. This is about less. If you ask people about the intranet, few will say it's great. A lot of people will say like, yes, very like cluttered, a lot of content there, a lot of old stuff there, a lot of complexity there. Because usually intranets were a place to do everything and nothing. And a lot of things where you didn't know where else to put it, you would put it on the intranet. And it was always, and I've seen at least 10 years of my career, I've seen this to say, we wanted to make intranets bigger and bigger, right? 10 years I've written a book about, I've written a book about intranets, and in the foreword I was saying like, intranet is the one place where everything happens, right? So you have all the communications there, you have communities there, you have the employee self-services there and the jump off points to maybe other systems. You have all the libraries there and the knowledge, and you have all the collaboration, right? And that tried to build these huge intranet portals, like 1 year, 2 year projects to actually make this happen. A lot of custom work, a lot of like burned out project teams, especially with the effect of, oh, now we've delivered this intranet, like it was such a long path. We don't have energy anymore to keep it updated and to continue to develop it. And the challenge with this approach was it tried to do everything. And by doing that, it did nothing really well. And what we see in the past couple of years now is a trend towards specialization to say, it doesn't make sense to do all these things in one portal. It makes sense to kind of separate them and to specialize a bit. And the specialization that pretty much goes along 3 major areas that we see. One is collaboration. If I start here from the right-hand side, and it's a pretty straightforward one, right? We all know things like Slack or Teams that kind of revolutionize the way we collaborate. And we also have integrated chat and video calls and all the documents there. So nobody today would say, let's collaborate in the intranet anymore. Like that's really happening somewhere in Teams, right? On the other hand, we've seen a move from the comp side of things to be more mobile, user-friendly, also be available on private devices, be available on personal devices, be very personalized and like easy to use. I cannot like do a big training for people about this. They don't want all the clutter. They just want the core stuff that really matters to them. And the last thing is this library part where you say, hey, we anyway have so many knowledge libraries. It could be different systems. Maybe you have a Confluence there or a SharePoint or another SharePoint if you're like a multinational global company with M&A activities. There's so many different knowledge areas. You cannot consolidate all of this into an intranet all the time, right? So the understanding is moving forward, we have a more specialization of these different functions, and the intranet kind of morphs into a leaner front door approach, right? And this fits very well with trend number 2. So the front door doesn't hold a lot of like these documents and the big content or the team collaboration, but with this, it can be more communication centered, more lightweight, more like the front door, but it can be on all the channels. That's something we see, and that's also, Lara, as I see it and understand it, Gartner and others are predicting the same thing here, right?
Yeah, they actually start to use that term front door as well. And they also talk about, bring that back to sort of the multi-channel experience where they say multiple entry points, but one kind of front door to lead to the rest of the stuff.
There is, because we talk a lot about analysts, there's an analyst company out there which specializes for 10 years now only on intranets, like Gartner and others are doing like a ton of other tech. And there's a company out there that's called Clearbox. They're based in the UK, and they only specialize in intranets. And they offer and they a report about intranets that has been updated like just a couple of weeks ago. It's 700 pages. I have to say that, so be careful. But it's the most comprehensive research about intranets that's available on the market, with all the vendors in there. And if you want to learn about what's going on right now, what are the trends, and what are also the categories that they look at, how are intranets looking like, and so on, I think that's a great read that we can only recommend here. It's free to download, so no cost for you. If you check out and you go to Clearbox and you look for intranet report, you will find this. I think it's a fantastic resource. We are also sharing this because Staffbase was very well awarded in the report as being outstanding in 5 categories, well ahead of a lot of others. And I don't want to share this to say Staffbase is great. Maybe that's also the case. But what I want to share is here, also this report kind of looks in the future and says branding is important, communication is important, omni-channel is important. It's important to focus on the really important things, and the front door concept, as the analysts say. So it's usually, especially if you look also at different tools, and we don't want to talk too much about tools today, nobody is doing bad or good software. It's more to think like, does an intranet vendor really fit to what I want to do and what I think is a modern intranet and fits to what we are doing, right? So again, a good recommendation, if you have the time, check out this report. I think, yeah, Lara, thank you. Lara just shared the link here to this report. As I said, like it's free for you to download, and probably 2 days of reading involved, but after that you will be very much know it all. And especially if you are in the process of a relaunch, you want to build a short list of systems, you want to think about criteria for evaluation and so on. You also want to show to maybe IT or to management, hey, we did great research. I think that's a fantastic source. We can only recommend that will save you a lot of time.